Week 4 of Motorcycle Awareness
Uh,
Month, usually held in September. Because of COVID here in New Zealand, we have bumped it to October, and it coincides generally with the start of spring. Weather's warming up, motorcyclists are hitting the streets en masse with their mates and making the most of the better weather. Now, this generally coincides with a spike in motorcycle-related accidents with ACC. So ACC putting on Motorcycle Awareness Month and trying to upskill motorcyclists across the country with skills, keeping our skills sharp, all the gear, wearing all the gear and making sure all the gear is up to spec. And the other part of the triangle is your motorbike. Is it set up? Is it ergonomically set up for you? Is it has it fared well over the off season? And there's no one better to talk to when we start talking about motorcycle setup than ergonomics and suspension tuning wizard Dave Moss, all the way from California. Hello.
Good morning to you, Raymond. Thanks for having me on for the Motorcycle Awareness Month.
Great to catch up once again. And it's always fun talking to you about the setup of our motorcycles. So I guess let's start with the situation that a lot of motorcyclists across the country find themselves in. The bike might have been in storage for the last, 3 to 5 months. What would be the first thing you'd do before you get out there on your bike?
Well, oddly enough, and I'm sure people will think twice about this because they never look for it, is cracks in the tire from storage. It's not exactly balmy in New Zealand in winter. And if you're at higher elevations and you do experience snow and very cold temperatures, then the rubber on the motorcycle obviously is not going to fare too well. One of the big ones that people find is that when tires are shipped internationally, they go up in an aircraft, which is cold. And if something bumps into the tires, moves the pallet around, you get cold cracks in shipping. Now, if your tires have been on the bike for a while and you haven't changed them for a few years, because you really don't do that many kilometers a month, one of the first things you have to go look at is just look around the sidewall and see, do you have any cracks in the sidewall of the tire? That's one of those things that people never, ever look for. They just check pressure. Do I still have some from the 3 months it's been sitting in the shed? Or if you're lucky, the garage, or if you're even luckier, a controlled temperature environment, which is much friendlier to the bike overall. So as odd as that sounds, it's one of the things that people miss right away. And it's not necessarily in working with Sergeant Sauter, one of the details they look for in the sidewall of the tire this time of year, if there is an accident, to go and investigate. But it's one of those topics, as we keep introducing information, that creates a really interesting talking point amongst riders, because it's not the same old blurb. It's not the same thing. It's not the same rhetoric. It's a new idea that will cause everybody to go, that's rubbish. Well, how do you know it's rubbish? Have you checked your tires? No, I haven't. Then go and check them. And that, just as I've done every year when I've come over, is just to throw a few nuggets out there for people to leverage on. And you'll find somebody that's got plenty of cold cracks in the tire sidewall. And if they hadn't looked and if they hadn't checked, then that's just an accident waiting to happen.
Fair enough. Okay, so we've checked our tires. What other checks could we do on a motorbike that, has been in storage for a bit?
A lot of times, because the motorcycle's sat still, and almost every time, unless somebody's really careful, they don't take the wheels off and store them off the ground. The tire gets a lot of pressure. So depends on whether the tire is still in round. So that's one part. The other part is when the bike sits, the forks and the shocks sit in one position. So if there's any dirt and debris between the fork tube and the oil seal, then there's a little avenue for the oil to work its way up. And then that generally will either leak down the fork if you've got upside down forks, or it will sit on top of the oil seal, and then it'll gather and just create depth of oil, so that when you get the bike out and you push it out the driveway and you go for a quick ride, there's oil everywhere. So before you ride the bike, especially with telescopic forks or right side up, where you've got the big fat leg on the bottom and the small tube all the way up into the triple clamps, pull the dust seals up and clean them, blow it out, get all the dirt and debris out. If there's any oil in there, clean it all off. For those that are a little more conscientious, using a seal saver device just to clean the oil seal out and get any dirt and debris out of the way will save them a big major oil seal failure and oil everywhere. It's a little more difficult on upside down forks, which are much more common today, but you still have to pull the dust seal down, but then you wipe the dust seal out because the oil's been sitting on it. And it's not unusual when you pull those dust seals down, especially on the left leg, which is the kick side or side stand leg, for there to be more oil than the other one because it carries more weight. And the hard part with upside down forks is that seal saver is going to cause it to leak. So you have to keep the dust seals down and do that. So before you ride, it's really a good idea. Stand the bike up, check your tire pressures, get those set, pull the dust seals up and out of the way, and then just gently nudge the front end with the brake on, up and down a little bit, and see if you get a ring of oil. And if you do, then there's the next step, which is to either use a seal saver and see if it worked, or realize you got a leaky fork, and instead of riding around and then getting fork oil on your brakes, which causes you to crash, which we don't want, you figure out right away there's an issue before you find yourself in trouble. Same goes for the rear shocks. Push them up and down. They have just the same as a fork. It's just that small shaft that goes inside the shock body. Is it leaking? Is it not? If you push down on a shock and it smacks right back out at you, just like you got an uppercut, then the nitrogen that was in the shock, in the bladder area or the reservoir, is inside the shock. So push the front end, push the back end. Does it feel normal? Do you have any oil leaks? There's the first part about preparation. In terms of before you even ride, you know you're not getting yourself in trouble from leaking oil from the suspension.
Now, we've recently had another lockdown due to COVID here in New Zealand, and a lot of people are mentioning the COVID chin or the COVID 5 kgs. If we've had a bit of time off over the winter and you know, put on an extra couple of kgs like I might have, now would be a good time to reset up the sag and kind of adjust the suspension on the bike.
Well, the bottom line there is self-investment is never an issue, especially in times of stress. But there is a price to pay for that down the pipe, as you say, and your motorcycle is a primary pipe for that one. If you've put on somewhere in the region of 10 to 15 kilograms, then what you might find, because you're riding in spring when it's cold, is that your fork and shock travel is at maximum. Because of the extra weight, you make the suspension work extra hard. And because of that, you need to put a cable tie on the right fork leg, and you need to observe your shock travel. If there's not an O-ring on it, just a tiny bit of grease on the shock shaft to leave a dirt ring. And when you go for your first ride, go at 70%. Take a look, take your time, off you go. Go around, spend about an hour on the bike to let your eyes begin to see and feel the speed again. Let your body and brain start to get your hand-eye coordination going. But go slow. And when you come back, have a look at how much travel you used on the forks and the shocks. Now, if your self-investment was very rich and you feel well-deserved, even at slow speeds, you may bottom your suspension out. So at that point, just taking a nice leisurely 40 minutes to an hour ride, coming home and having a look, or halfway on the ride before you turn around and come back, have a look, which is better. Then you know how to ride home to avoid any problems. If you ride out, it's cold, it's slow, oil temperature's slow, so suspension feels really hard because the oil won't heat up and it will not flow. And at that point, you're getting your teeth chipped. So you're going to ride slow, because when you go home, you don't want red urine from being beaten to death by a motorcycle in freezing cold weather because the suspension won't work. So there's a self-fulfilling safety mechanism in there that works for everybody. But for those that don't take that first step, that first half an hour of the ride, to just calm down, calibrate your eyes, feel the road, get your timing back between hand-eye coordination, and look at how much travel you're using, then you're just taking the motorcycle for granted. And as we all know, that's just a really, really bad idea.
Now, you've spent a lot of time on track, and I don't want to dwell too far on the track because most of our viewers will probably be road riders. But if you spend a bit of time off the bike, now motorcycling is more, and as it was explained to me, is more of a skill that you continually have to work on. If you take a bit of time off the bike, your skills are going to start dropping. On the track, if you haven't been on the track for a while, you're going to take it easy, right, for the first day or half a day or first few laps at least. Is that a fair kind of assumption?
I think, Ray, it's not an assumption, it's a fact. And you're talking about something there that's gospel. So I will stop riding at the track typically at the end of November, and I won't get on a bike again on a racetrack in the US until March. When I get back on a bike, my first 1 to 2 sessions on no brakes, and I'm using the gearbox. My eyes aren't calibrated to speed. My timing is terrible. My coordination is all off, and I can't do the same thing twice. So no matter when I ride for the first time in spring, when I come over for the tours, my first ride literally is to go around Palmerston North and just get my eye in. Feel the gearbox, feel the bike, feel how it turns, feel how it brakes. The track is no different at all. And the worst part about the track is because nobody's coming at you. There's no lanes, there's no rubbish on the track, there's nothing in the way, there's no driveways, no other cars. So it gives you an elevated sense of confidence. But what you don't realize is you're very, very forgetful about what you did last. And for those of us that want to go to the track to experience it and not get a speed achievement award from the police for inappropriate behavior, going to the track is actually at the start of the season an absolutely brilliant place for you to go to safely and go ahead and just get your coordination back, all your timing. Everybody's going the same way. They're at a similar group pace. And at the start of the year, everybody's rusty. So would you rather clean your skills up on the track and just go do 1 or 2 track days just to wake your brain up and get your coordination back? Or would you rather go on the street and if you make one error, pay a heavy price? So personally, I hope everybody realizes that going to the track is a closed private road. And when you start your season, it is absolutely brilliant to go back out there in a super safe environment. And if something happens, medical's right there. But you've got the best opportunity in the world to say hello to your bike again. Find your spot, find your rhythm, smile, but do it in a way and a pace where your environment is really, really risk averse. And you come away from there much better off. Because when you go on the street for the first time, as we said, that first mistake, not fair to your family, your friends who have to pick up all the pieces, maybe take care of you, maybe heal you up, or worse, have to deal with an incident where you need a lifetime of care. Not appropriate. But people don't think of track days like that. Now, those of us that race, that have been there for a long time, our first track day is all about getting up to speed. It is not about track records. It is not anything to do with going fast, ever. It's all about saying hello to the motorcycle again and introducing yourself to it and the track. to bring back what you remember from last year. But you can't bring it back instantly because we're not robotic. Nobody's putting a chip in your head, and you're not an arcade game where you can just go. So think of the track as a closed private road where you can bring your skills back in a really, really positive environment and go home feeling much better than going out on your first road ride being scared to death because you missed a corner and then you missed another corner. And now what you're going to do? Because you're obviously over your head, but a track won't let you get to that usually at the start of the year because the pace is so low.
The other thing that I've said before as well, if you're not, keen to get on the track, a good way to kickstart your riding season would be a Ride Forever course. And you can find out more information about those at rideforever.co.nz. Best case scenario, you learn something. Worst case scenario, you spend a day out with like-minded individuals out maybe checking out part of the country that you haven't seen before.
I'm a firm believer in that too, because that's if really you're coming back, you've only a couple of years of experience. The track might be daunting for you emotionally or mentally because you categorize it and project it in a certain way. Starting the year with a course, because I've done all of them, is a great way in a controlled environment where speeds are kept to your ability, in which you can literally, with great guidance from incredibly experienced instructors, get the, oi, you're doing this well, but hang on, you're missing this. So let's work on that for a bit. There's no substitute for experience. You can't get wisdom. It's not free, and it's learned by experience. So working with the multitude of incredible instructors that do the safety courses, irrespective of where you are, they have a second set of eyes that you don't have. And they can bring some insight to you. Before you go off on your next big ride, try working on this, this, and this. But for now, we're going to work on that. So that when you do go out on the ride, especially when it's your first one of the season, again, it's not that you're not taking the motorcycle for granted, but you might be taking your skills for granted. So taking a bronze, gold, or silver course makes perfect sense when you're a newer rider to just get yourself back on the motorcycle with supervision and leverage all that knowledge and wisdom that you don't have yet.
Dave Moss, you're a mind of information. You've got so many nuggets of gold coming out of those ears every day. If people want a little bit more information or want some guidance, they want to know how to do a certain thing on their bike that you've talked about, where can they find your videos, your content, and find out more information about what you talk about?
So you can go, it's Dave Moss Tuning across the board. If you Google that, please, I'm begging you, please put something after my name like tires, suspension, forks, shocks, because there's over 25 years of work and you just get buried. So if you want something, Google my name and a topic and it'll pop up and you'll see it on Facebook, Instagram are the two popular sources. If you want more in-depth content, then the website has, I think now we're just over 1,700 pieces of work. And that's video, podcast, and apps. So it's $10 US for the month, which I think is about, with current exchange, 15, 16 Kiwi a month. Or you can go in there, create your own free profile on the website at davemosstuning.com and just have a look around. Get yourself a sense and taste of what's in there in information. If you're a typical Kiwi and you tinker, then you're going to be happy because there's so much information there in simple nuggets, like you said, Ray, and thank you very much for that help you go step by step by step instead of, you need to do this. And here's this PhD level barrage of information that just knocks you sideways. And you go, you know what? I think I'll have some fish and chips instead. That's too hard.
I don't know if you saw on social media the other day, Dave, but I gave you a shout out because I cleaned the brakes on the Tenere 700.
You mean that toothbrush you've had in your bathroom for ages actually made its way to the bike?
Exactly.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And And the great thing about getting you started and changing the MT-07 out with the straps in the roof and getting that job done, I mean, it shows you it's not that hard. And with a bit of knowledge and that great Kiwi ability to tinker, it's not hard to actually have a go. And the beauty of being in New Zealand is there's plenty of people there willing to give you a hand on the simple stuff, in using a tape measure, taking a look at the way the tire's shaped, looking at a cable tie in the fork and shock travel in the rear. It's been brilliant and really an honor to come to the country for the last, I think it's 8 years now, excluding COVID, and go into communities and help them help each other. And all I'm trying to do, as we've talked about before, is save a life every day through education and information. But when I leave, I'm trying to leave versions of me in cities, towns, so everybody helps each other. And it seems to be working in less accidents, less close calls, because when the bike sets up properly in a crisis, you can respond to that crisis versus you can react to it. So if you ponder those two words, they're very, very different in the way you approach a situation, because respond means you have time. React means you ran out of time. And there's lots of reasons for that, the primary being ergonomics. And there's plenty of videos on that. So we don't really need to touch on that, other than saying, would you ever rent a car and never move the seat and the steering wheel for the period of rental? And if the answer to that is, well, that's stupid. Well, what have you done to your motorcycle to fit it to you? It's a good one to think about, because we're not the same shape, size. We don't wear the same gloves. We don't have the same shoe size. We don't have the same inseam. Yet a motorcycle is apparently meant to work for everybody on the planet. So good luck with that. But have a look at the ergonomics videos and get yourself comfortable, because in a crisis, you can respond.
Dave Moss, thank you very much. And thank you for being a Motorcycle Awareness Month ambassador. Happy Motorcycle Awareness Month. DaveMossTuning.com.
Thanks very much, Ray. It's always a pleasure, mate. And like the rest of us that come and tour every year, hopefully we can get back in 22. And if not, we'll still gun for 23. And aside from that, really appreciate ACC and NZTA and yourself putting all these events together, even if they're live, to keep getting that information out to motorcycle riders, to make sure that when they ride the bike, they think first, don't do first, because that'll save a ton of lives just by itself.